To me, workshops are the beating heart of project-based learning. If you are the facilitator in the classroom, you're not necessarily the teacher or the instructor with project-based learning. If you're the facilitator, the thing that drives students, the thing that pumps the proverbial lifeblood of PBL are these workshops. And creating them and running them and creating systems in your classroom that make them accessible to students. And so the idea here is that we're going to plan, we're going to brainstorm, we're going to create, and we're going to evaluate workshops. So we're going to spend a lot of time with that. It is the core component of our pedagogy for the course. We're going to start off with, these are our subtasks to accomplish this. We're going to examine sources, which can help inform workshop topics. And then can I get just a volunteer to read?
We're going to evaluate 2 sample workshops using our workshop creation rubric.
Yeah, workshop creation rubric, brand new rubric. We'll take a look at that.
Utilize the computational thinking skill of decomposition with a selected assignment from digital manipulation.
Yes, the unwritten pedagogy. So every, OnRamps course has a core pedagogy. Ours is project-based learning, but computational thinking is definitely a core pedagogy of the course as well. It's just not as explicitly stated. It's the hidden pedagogy of the course.
Collaboratively create a workshop to accompany a specific skill technique needed for one of our digital manipulation assignments.
Yes, creation of a workshop. And last but not least,
share, discuss, and evaluate our created workshop using the workshop creation rubric.
All right. So thank you very much. Let's start by just doing a poll real quick. There's lots of options here, and these are check boxes. So we know now from our exploration in UI elements that you can check more than one, but up to 3. So I don't want you to, you may be saying, okay, all of these different things inform how I find topics for workshops, but I want you to pick your top 3. So limit yourself down to the top 3. What informs the topics of workshops that you create in your course? All right, here come the results. The top vote getters. Number 1 was student requests. Students are requesting workshop. If that's our number 1, can somebody speak to that? How do students actually do that?
So for me, as soon as I explain the topics and they start to dive into the assignments, as they come up with issues or when they're applying their knowledge, they're figuring out, oh, I'm not quite sure how to do this. And if it's more than one, that's when I typically do a workshop. If it's just one, then I sit with that student.
And Stuart, you were going to say something, I believe, too?
That sounds kind of like that. Sometimes we just, when I kind of intro something, we do a thumbs up, thumbs down on, do I know that skill, or do I have that skill, or do I need help? And that kind of drives it. And like she said, if it's one, that's me one-on-one. But frequently, if there's even one, I know that there's more than that. They're just not brave enough to, show it with their thumb.
Does anybody have like some type of electronic way or like some mechanism? So the thumb up, thumb down, kind of polling of students, but is there like any formal mechanism within the class that like a student could go up somewhere and like write it or enter it into a worksheet, not a worksheet, but like a form, a Google form or something? Does that exist in anybody's classroom?
That's a great idea.
Okay.
That was my fault.
Just wondering, just pondering. Okay. Well, maybe that's something that we can brainstorm about some ways, because if it's our number 1, then clearly it would behoove us to have some good proactive systems put in place in our classroom to facilitate that and make it even easier for students to request them, right? Student conferences, so things that come up within student conferences, once you start noticing trends, I take it, with issues that seem to be popping up, those seem to inform workshops. And then performance on course assignments was number 3. I noticed that decomposition of assignment tasks was number 4. This one right here is something that we're going to do today. It's number 4 on here, so it's definitely in the in the leaderboard, but it's probably the most proactive one, right? So creating a workshop takes some time. You certainly can do one kind of like an on-the-fly workshop. The ones that we're going to look at today are kind of more pre-planned, or the more pre-planned and pre-packaged varietal. And so if we take the opportunity to kind of decompose, and if we have taught the course and we know kind of where students are going to stumble historically, then that helps to inform certainly what these workshops can be. And then we can prepare them ahead of time and kind of prep for them. So that's something that we'll definitely be looking at today. All right, thanks, y'all. Scroll on down. We are going to take a look here at this workshop evaluation rubric. It is brand new. It's very shiny. It is going to help us empathize with our students because they have to look at rubrics and break them down and, guess what they need to do as a result of that. So we're going to be empathetic learners today by looking at this workshop evaluation rubric and try to see how well we're able to apply it to workshops that we see, and then take those criteria once we've kind of internalized them and create a workshop based around what we see up here, using this as kind of a framework. You all did such a wonderful job reading before. Could I borrow you one more time to also read the criteria here for what goes into the evaluation of our workshops?
Okay, the rationale for the workshop is clear. The audience is targeted. The dependencies and follow-ups are noted. The workshop is appropriately timed so as to not exceed 10 minutes.
Okay. And how many points is it worth?
1 point.
1 point. We'll make it very simple today. Everything's going to be worth 1 point. All right. How about number 2?
Decomposition. The topic of the workshop is a discrete topic. There is very little room to further subdivide the workshop. The experience is quick, tight, and focused.
All right. What do we mean by like discrete topic? It's in italics, so it must be important.
That is one simple thing.
One simple thing. The simplest unit that we can break it down into without trying to bloat from there. It's very easy to get workshop bloat.
Like
All
you
right.
can't do color manipulation and also try to teach them radiance in the same one.
Exactly. And it, sometimes you're in the middle of workshop and you're like, well, yeah, let's just go down a rabbit hole right here. It feels about right, but trying to keep it focused, trying to keep it tight is important. All right, number 3.
There is an obvious thought put into beginning of the workshop and how it grabs the attention of the participant.
So the old-fashioned hook, which I find to be probably one of the hardest things to do well as a teacher. Number 4, visualization.
Whether through screenshots, diagrams, charts, animations, or videos, the concept is brought to life in a visual manner.
All right, so being able to provide some type of visualization that accompanies what we're talking about verbally is important. The 5th one, guided practice.
The opportunity for both students and instructors to work through an example together.
Okay, working through an example together. And last but not least, formative assessment.
Whether or not students understand the topic and focus before dismissing.
Some way to assess them before they head off back to their desks or their tables or wherever they're sitting. Any questions about any of these criteria?
Not a question, but I can see where, thinking back about some of my workshops, they might have been lengthier than 10 minutes. And so, I can see the need to, keep it short and sweet. Just throwing a question out there. If I'm addressing something or a need or a set of needs, does that mean I'm hitting maybe 2 or 3 10-minute workshops?
What do y'all think?
It seems like we're deficient on 2 or 3 skills in order to achieve something. And there's a relationship. I mean, let's say I need 2 or 3 of these skills in order to finish an assignment. Do I just say, okay, here's workshop number 1. Now here's workshop number 2. And now here's number 3. Or is there some other approach to that?
Well, I would say that you would approach it that way, but between the workshops, they should have some hands-on stuff going on. So you do your first workshop, I would say, and then you would have some sort of practice, some sort of exercise that they do, and then go on to the next part of that as you scaffold it up and build onto something bigger.
So frequently in my workshop, we're kind of doing it together with like guided questions to like, why are we doing this?
Mm-hmm.
In my workshop, we are working on something together. And by the time that we get to the end of the workshop, we have all done it. I've done it up front, but the class has also done it individually on their computer or however.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, I think a good example of that is, let's say, loops and arrays. So, there's a couple of assignments where they have to use both. And those are not, those are pretty complicated programming concepts if the students have never, if this is their first coding experience. So you have to teach, you can't teach both of those in 10 minutes. So yeah, you have to teach a little bit about loops and have them run some loops and do, and like, I mean, I think that's a perfect example of what Stuart was saying, is doing a little bit of hands-on, and then doing the array, then making that clear. Are there any questions on loops? And then moving on to the next topic, arrays. And that is definitely it's going to be more than 10 minutes, multiple workshops kind of spliced together, I would say.
Thanks for your feedback, guys.
If we go into like so YouTube has like great data that they provide, right? And if you look at like the drop off in just engagement of users, which is not too unlike the engagement of a student that's probably sitting in like a session, like a workshop session, there's this precipitous drop after about like 3 to 4 minutes. Just precipitous, right? So that's why this idea of them being as short as possible is a powerful one, because if you can, go, I don't know whether you want to do them back to back to back to back. It's easier that way for time management. If you're running out of time, right? If time is the issue, then that may be the only way to approach it. But there might also be other ways to approach the workshop too. If building up a repertoire over time of maybe some different things that they can do that you don't need to necessarily run, but they could go engage with to learn it. Having students run workshops for other students could break it up a little bit and just make it seem different enough that you can get the engagement back. I don't know, anybody do anything like that? Kind of try to break the pattern a little bit so that in students' minds it feels fresher.
Part of what I've done is if there's something, maybe there's 2 or 3 skills connected to an assignment, I will do a workshop on what I think may be the first skill, and then I'll give them a little bit of time to work, partly because as they struggle through, sometimes they have those aha moments, then they don't need to go to the others. There may be some that want to come to all 3 though, but that's kind of the way I've done it, to break it up a little, and some of them figure it out and go on their own and get ahead of me.
Not in this class, but in a different one, I have done some short workshops in Screencastify, so a little video workshop, and then kind of keep that available by topic. So, a student could go look at that skill offline or on their own time and as needed.
Definitely. And those are the workshops, that would pay a dividend later, because then you can if they need it to be retaught, then you save yourself the direct teach of having to do that. So anytime we can create the multiple pathways to learn something is will have better outcomes for us. I was just thinking, you all made me think. This past week, I was trying to teach myself something in After Effects, and it was really 3 discrete skills. And I watched a video of a guy doing it, and I followed along, and I was doing these 3 discrete things. And then I was like, well, let me go back tomorrow, the next day, and go back and do those 3 things again to see if I remember how to do it. And I think I got through like 1.5 of the initial steps before I lost it. And I think that's just because it kind of speaks to that idea. Like, if you're trying to hit too many discrete things in a row, you may pick up on the first one, you may even pick up on the second one, but then there's this drop off after that. And so I definitely experienced that this week. So it made me think. Thanks for sharing, Neil. I want to, this rubric is out of 6 points, and very similar to the way that we assign points within when I teach the TAs how to assess the projects in the course. One of the things that I tell them is that the points are not binary. Usually, some of them are, but most of them are along some type of sliding scale. And we want to be able to reward students for a criteria that is addressed somewhat, and there may be some types of deficiencies with it. So as a group, I want to kind of look at how you might, if you are going to discretely break up a point into these 1/4 point chunks, what would that look like? And what are some criteria that you would put to earn a full point versus, let's say, 3/4 of a point versus 0? What are some of these kind of language pieces that we can put in? And so there's a link here that'll take you to a Google Sheet, looks something like this. And you should all have editing privileges on this. Let's just go ahead and pick a cell and put some criteria. I'll start off. I'll kind of give you one to start off with. Number 1, to me, like a full point means that pretty much you fully met the criteria. That would be a descriptor that I would provide a TA for a full point. But there's other ways to describe what goes into a 1 as well as these other categories. So I want you to just take a few minutes and just think it through, and then we'll go back to that page, and we'll edit that page with some of the language that you've used. And then I will also share some of the language that I use when I'm instructing the TAs. Another one that I would put for number 1, for instance, would be, a lot of people think that a 1 has to be perfect, that it has to be the best. It does not need to be perfect. So oftentimes a 1 is not perfect. I would describe a 1 as good or excellent. It can be both. I'll say it can be perfect. I'm gonna say not perfect necessarily. You did a good job, y'all. Fantastic. Some things I'd add in here: attempted something, but it's just completely wrong, would be a 0.25. Like a extreme lack of detail or follow through. And then the 0, I love the disengaged or no work. I think the easiest one is, I just say that this one it's just missing, just not even attempted, is an easy 0. All right, if you refresh the page, you'll see these criteria down here now, and we can amend these as we go through, certainly. We are going to use this sliding scale that we developed just now. We're going to use this rubric right here, and you are going to hop into a breakout room with a geographic contingent of your peers. We are going to evaluate 2 sample workshops. So
Excuse
go
me,
ahead
Eric.
Yeah.
Sorry. In the number 1 column, the second criteria says not perfect per se. Does that go in the 1?
Yeah, because I think not perfect to me is good, right? So I will always tell the TAs to give somebody a 1 if it's good. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
That clarifies.
Yep. It's hard to meet perfection, and everybody's like standard of perfection is different too, right? We really want to try to give it, this one, especially the 1, the most latitude possible, and still get that full point.
Could perfection sometimes be considered just like cosmetic? I mean, you got there, but your cosmetics weren't wonderful.
Yeah. And in fact, I think like some of these other things play into that, like the idea of impact. They could be great. It could be wonderfully put together, but the impact could just fall a little flat. That could be less than perfect, lacking the polish. Yeah, like you said. So all those things. I mean, perfection is a very hard standard to meet. So, and we don't expect we just need to show that they get it for this. And I certainly always tell the TAs that when in doubt, you're like waffling between these 2 points, a 1 or a 0.75. Always go to the higher one and give it. Don't take off, even if you're having a bad day. I don't know. I can't be the only one that feels like sometimes my grading is affected by my mood. But when in doubt, go higher rather than lower. All right, go ahead and click on this right here, and it's going to bring up these sample workshops. That'll look something like this. There are 2 in here. The first 4 slides are one workshop. The second 4 slides are another one. And you don't have to envision this as a Google slide. I don't want you to think of that these workshops are the instructor is pulling their students and they're showing a Google slideshow. I want you to look at these Google slides like they are the preparation of a workshop that is being delivered. All right, whether that means that the instructor is going to be diagramming something on the board, whether the students are going to be doing something on their computer. You can have all those different components, but the plan for the workshop is in slides. I'm going to put you into a group. We're going to do this kind of quick. So let's talk it through, because I want to make sure that we have enough time on the tail end to get everything done. So I will put up a timer. I'm going to try for the first time to put a timer in your breakout room so you can see the countdown as you go. And I would recommend that you make a copy of this. So if you go to File, make a copy, that way you can add whatever notes you want into the speaker's notes, especially for the ones that are going to be losing points. If you can explain what you saw to take away a point or fractions of points as a result of that. The speaker's notes would be a great place to put that, but you can't edit this one. You'll have to make a copy on your own. Questions before I put you into your, before you choose the breakout room that you want to go to? Welcome back, one and all. Hey, isn't that cool that you can broadcast to breakout rooms now? Where was that last year? Like that would have been
Is it
nice when we were all
development?
virtual, you know? Set up the directions, you know, so students don't get into a breakout room. They're like, what are we doing here?
That's a lesson learned from the pandemic.
Yeah, they've upped their game. They've evaluated and they've iterated. Their Zoom is going full project-based learning methodology right here. Hopefully that was enough time, but I didn't want to belabor the point. I think one of them was certainly harder to assess than the other one, I believe. And that the one that was probably harder to assess was the first one, workshop number 1. Based on our criteria, let me pull those back up again. All right, there's our evaluation rubric. So we got the fundamentals of the workshop, decomposing the topic, a hook, visualizations, visualizing it, a guided practice component, and an assessment component. Let's talk about this workshop. Where are we at with it? Who wants to tell me what your region was discussing?
Well, I think with the number 1, we got a 1.5.
1.5.
For the score, maybe 2. That video was not the most engaging.
Okay, what about the video? What was going on with the video?
Well, we didn't watch the whole thing because we watched about 2.5 minutes of it, and we just were not into it. So I can't tell you what it continued. So I mean, if I got bored with it, the kids would definitely get bored with it. It might have some good concepts later on, but we never got to that part.
So the video, what did this fictional instructor do with the video? My son called out his teacher for this the other day too. Yesterday, I picked him up and he's like, our teacher chose this video from YouTube to show us, and it was so boring.
Was it the computer voice?
Maybe.
Eric, what we discussed with that video is that should be like a flipped classroom where they see that video beforehand, and then when they go to the class, it uses a support. But with the 10 minutes that you have for workshop, you shouldn't be showing a video. You should be like on the point with what, like the other part was really good. I like the other part, but the video wasn't a need for it or call for it within a workshop.
And Stuart actually watched some of it and said that it strayed, it included, it kind of veered off into other topics besides translate. So
it sure did.
And my big point was that it went into the CSS where, if the students aren't familiar with it, then that's going to really throw them off. It's like, how do I, apply this to the JavaScript when they're using it for something completely I haven't seen before?
Central Texas gave this one a 1.
A 1.
1 out of 6.
Wow. Where did they get the points then? Like, what did you give this?
We gave a 1/4 point for the fundamentals.
Okay, 1/4 point for fundamentals.
And then
I think we made a sympathy category that they got most points in.
we're like, they tried, but didn't, but they, like Stuart said, they swung and they missed.
Okay.
0.25 on the first 4, and then 0 on guided practice and formative assessment.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that for sure it got a 0 on guided practice and a 0 on formative assessment. There's nothing that the students are asked to do. There's no type of assessment that shows that they understand what a translate function does at this point in time. I mean, this is essentially the text from the course, right?
Yeah.
Like, you got any questions? There's your Canvas page right there. Consult that. It should answer all. The video, yeah, absolutely, was just pulled from YouTube because it said translate, and it had some translate, but it definitely went all over the place. It's about CSS, as Howard was saying. And then what about the hook?
That's where they got most of their points, because it was an interesting beginning, but then they let us down.
But it doesn't, we agreed that the translate didn't have anything really to do with the translate in P5JS.
If it was just resources or a plan to give a workshop, that could be okay. Like, hey, I'm gonna code some stuff up with the student, but to show the video, no.
Yeah.
Really, we think they should have get a 0 for confusing the student.
So they actually get negative points because the students are going to walk away from this workshop in a fundamentally worse place than when they joined it. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay.
Eric, in what category are we grading that? How effective is a workshop I mean, what category is that?
So it kind of falls into a couple different categories. So maybe the first one, there needs to be a clear rationale, like why the students need it. You need to consider what they need to know before they come to it, that it's focused, a focused topic. That's part of it, right? Like this one straight off, it was talking about CSS, it was talking about some other things, not just translate. The hook was sort of there because they're like, oh, translate, Google Translate. Translate.
Right,
Yeah.
because for example, like visualization, it had a video. I mean, was it an effective video? No. So
No,
it would,
so
would it get
maybe 0.25 for that?
That's why we gave 0.25.
But
Yeah.
see, like, so then maybe we need to say like an effective screenshot diagram chart, I mean, like something, right? Because like I gave the visualization a full point, it had one, but then maybe where it fell short was in the fundamentals.
Could it be that it follows under this criteria right here, that certainly it was addressed, there was a visualization, but it was just not at all effective, like it was just a random video? That might be a way of looking at why it would get a 0.25. Certainly it wasn't missing one, so it didn't get a 0, but did it have a strong impact on participants? Did they walk away with a full understanding of how to work, translate in P5JS? Maybe not. So to me, it was attempted, but the video was completely wrong. It just was not effective at conveying what needed to be conveyed.
Okay.
And yeah, we have to be, definitely always have to be careful about videos. It's very easy to find videos on a topic on YouTube, but very hard to find videos on a topic that actually aligns with what you want to teach, right? So therein lies the difficulty. Okay, just real quick before we're gonna talk about the second one for like 2 seconds, and we're gonna go to break. And you can take 5 and we'll come back. What about this second workshop? I mean, what did you see here? Did it get points taken off anywhere?
I didn't see a clear hook like on the first one. And then, so I took off the point there. And then the only thing that I was worried about was the 10-minute timeline.
Okay.
So on decomposition, I gave it a 0.75.
I think that's complete. So you gave it a 0 for hook. And
I'm sorry, the fundamentals. I took off because of the time.
Okay. Totally agree that this one has the opportunity. It definitely has the possibility of exceeding 10 minutes just based on the amount of things to cover in there. So the 0.75 here would be a very fair point. There is no obvious hook in this one that's given. Can we agree that the guided practice and the formative assessment are strong, at least? We also worried about what a conversation that came up in last week's session was, at what point with the formative assessment is it too much? So we don't want students to feel like when they come to a workshop that they're just going to be asked to do more work, right? Like that we're going to throw on another assignment on top of what they already have to do, and that would actively discourage them from attending, some of them. And so I guess the key words to focus in on here, it has to be quick and it has to be painless for the student to do. So something real quick, just to see if they get it or not extra work given to them, just something that they see as an inherent value.
Well, the guided practice, I mean, if they can do the guided practice and get some sort of result, that's the formative assessment. Like you could combine those two, couldn't you?
You could. So certainly you could condense this down and do one as guided practice and then one as the formative assessment or something, like have them fill out the rest, add maybe 2 more down here, and it could combine as both. Absolutely.
Or the formative assessment could be leave as a homework and follow up the next day.
Well, that's true, but then is it painless for them to do it? If you have great students, they might be like, yes, please give us
more homework.
More homework.
I have never heard that.